Hi, everyone. Um, let's get started. Our speaker has allowed some questions during the talk, so you can unmute if you have them. Otherwise, you can feel free to leave them in the chat and we'll address them at the end. I'm so happy to have Tarik here to do an Our Stories talk today. Please take it away.
Thanks so much. Yeah, good to be here, so to speak. Um, if people are comfortable, no pressure, it could be nice to see faces. Otherwise, it just feels kind of weird talking to a room of just no one. But again, don't worry if that's not possible. Yeah, so excuse me, I'm just getting over a cough. As was just said, this is pretty informal. I don't have like a super concrete plan of what I want to say. So I did that on purpose so that if there are questions or particular directions people want to take this in, I'm not invested in um, a very specific plan, and we can kind of go down a rabbit hole if that comes up. But I guess I'm supposed to talk a little bit about just generally speaking. The prompt is kind of my experiences as a mathematician, what kind of brought me to where I am, and um, what the sort of compass is that I try to use in determining how to engage in the mathematics community on a daily basis. So just a little bit of background about me. Um, I am a professor at Haverford College, which is right outside Philadelphia. I live in Philly. I have been there for about 5 years. It's a small liberal arts college. Um, it is more towards the research side of liberal arts colleges. So we have like relatively low teaching responsibility in the realm of liberal arts colleges, and we're supposed to be kind of keeping up our research portfolios alongside thinking a lot about how to teach effectively. So it's kind of both focuses for a professor. I went to undergrad at the University of Pennsylvania, so that's when I first moved to Philly, really loved it, and then spent like 10 years in grad school and in a postdoc in other places, and have just been wanting to get back to Philly. And I was really glad to find a job that brought me back here. Yeah, so that's like the super basic outline. I study geometry and topology. I've seen that there are a couple of talks that have happened this conference on those topics, so maybe folks are familiar with some of those basic ideas. And yeah, I would say for the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, I've spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about how to combine like genuine political organizing with mathematics. Maybe people have heard of the Just Mathematics Collective, maybe you haven't. I am a founding member of the Just Mathematics Collective. We kicked off in the summer of 2020 during the sort of Black Lives Matter uprising, for lack of a better word, that was sweeping the nation in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. And we weren't really sure what the hell we were going to do. We didn't know what form whatever the hell we were making was going to take. We didn't know what we were doing or how to do it. We just kind of came together as a group of people who decided that it wasn't really appropriate to do nothing. And so we, at the very least, needed to pay some serious attention to whether or not there was something we could do in our position as mathematicians. And without that much deliberation, we realized there really was. Um, So, for example, our first campaign focused on a boycott of police collaborations between mathematics and the cops. Um, I did a postdoc at Brown University for 4 years after I graduated from undergrad. Nope, grad school. And so I was there for some time. One of the things about Brown is that it has an institute, a very kind of well-funded institute where they focus a lot on applied mathematics and computation. It's called ICERM, ICERM. And while I was there, actually like maybe a year into being there, I was pretty involved in community organizing work outside of my life as a mathematician, just in Providence, Rhode Island. And specifically, I was doing some organizing work, participating in organizing work that was meant to address the issue of police brutality in Providence, Rhode Island. And um, I knew a number of people through my organizing who had been actually targeted and physically beaten by cops in Rhode Island, in Providence. Um, that's just the background context. So I was really dismayed when I saw that ICERM, this big institute at the school that I was employed, had on its schedule that it was going to have a predictive policing conference where mathematicians from all over the country were going to come to this institute and think really hard, dedicate their intellectual abilities to designing new ways for the cops to make their jobs more efficient, whatever that means. Of course, there's a lot of um, background that we could spend hours talking about when it comes to predictive policing. The short version of this conversation is that you have a machine learning sort of type of algorithm, which requires training data in order for the algorithm to make predictions on where crime is or isn't most likely to happen. And so, in a system like that, the one we have in the US, where policing is extremely racialized and the cops already spend disproportionate amounts of time in poor communities of color, the data is going to reflect that. And then the algorithm that you design is going to make the predictions that are based on whatever inequities that are baked into the way policing already works in this country. So it's a very, very fraught and dangerous way to apply our knowledge. And what really hit me emotionally was that some of the same cops who I've heard their names as individual offenders, people who were involved in beatings, were going to this conference. It wasn't just like mathematicians, it was meant to be like a sort of genuine collaboration between the Providence police and mathematicians. And so that really struck me and made me think about, okay, like on first glance, and not just on first glance, but on second glance and on third glance and on fourth glance, because of how um, um, intensely the message of mathematics being apolitical is internalized by people who are trained in our area is it's as if what we're doing has nothing to do with reality. But if you just like peek behind that veil even a little bit, you see that's just totally false. And so, yeah, our first campaign, we got like almost 2,000 signatures from mathematicians who pledged never to lend their energies in mathematics to working with police. And that was what launched our group into a collective. Um, Especially in the last like 3 or 4 years, we've been really focused on a number of other campaigns. One in the last 2 years that's been super, super important for obvious reasons is our campaign for academic boycott of Israeli academic institutions, which are complicit in the ongoing genocide in Palestine and the apartheid regime in the West Bank. This is a boycott that we didn't invent. It's a boycott that has been launched by Palestinians for the last 21 years. And it's a boycott that specifically asks international academics not to be engaging with institutions that use their um, prestige as places of learning to launder um, genocidal and militaristic technologies, making them more palatable to the global community, to Israeli civil society. I mean, a lot of the technologies that mathematicians train people who go on to make such technologies, like the security cameras, the drones, the one of the major sort of exposés that came out of the last 9 months in Israel was the fact that exposed the fact that the military is using AI technologies for quickly generating targets for assassination. Uh, and so there's all these various ways that people who are trained in mathematics are either helping to develop those kinds of technologies, but even if they're not, when they engage with the academic institutions that produce the people who will go on to make those technologies, they're indirectly helping those technologies to be developed too. So if you go and work at an Israeli university, even if you're an algebraic geometer or doing pure number theory or whatever, you're also lending your time and your expertise to train many students who will likely go on to develop such weapons, bombs, missiles. The biggest Israeli weapons firm, Elbit, ELBIT, if you see it in the news, actually like was spawned as a startup at the major technical university in Israel, and basically their entire employee bank is fueled through the Technion. So, like the students who work there, many of them go on to be involved in this industry of death and destruction. So anyway, this is obviously like a long conversation, which we don't have time to really get into. But like basically, in the last 5 minutes, I haven't really talked about like too much personal information, just kind of like things that transpired and not really like how I got into it or like emotionally how I got into it. So I'll spend like just 2, 3 minutes on that. But the bottom line was, um, I at some point became radicalized politically, and that's a complicated process. Like I don't know exactly. It's not like there was one event that in my life that made this happen. It was just the product of growing up, in a sort of post 9/11 reality as an Arab person in this country, and as a person who my father's family comes from Algeria, indigenous to Algeria for thousands of years before his generation, very involved in the war for liberation from French colonialism, and as a result, have had deep ties of solidarity to Palestine for the last 75 years. There's been huge exchanges of um, information, how to engage in various kinds of resistance between Algeria and Palestine since the 1930s, before either, resistances really kicked off in earnest. And so I grew up on a diet of pro-Palestine politics. And so that eventually mixed with just my own experiences of racism and marginalization living in this country. Um, And I always felt for the majority of my training that this was a part of my life that I, can embrace, but not here. It has nothing to do with how I'm learning this, pure mathematics. This is just something else that's going on, and I can't really bring that, or there's no way to bring that into into what's going on mathematically in my life. And that just wasn't sustainable because I was miserable. I was miserable because I knew that what was important to me needed to be something that I spent more time on in my life. And I couldn't do that if like 90% of my time was just dedicated to what felt like a very alienating scientific practice. I needed there to be more of a merger between these two passions. And more so than just that, like I felt, especially in grad school, um, unbelievably isolated and alienated. Um, you have these experiences on the daily of people just saying in passing the most insanely Zionist, like out of pocket things, just like because that's what they believe, and they are so used to that just being totally par for the course and unquestioned in like our academic spaces, even though like they're more likely to take the point of view that politics has nothing to do with mathematics. They don't have any problem expressing their political views in a mathematical context. They just blurt it out when we're out at lunch in between talks or whatever. And so I constantly had the experience of feeling like I am like kind of hated in this department. Not directly, but the person who I am and what I come from is. And so that just needed to change or I was going to quit. And so that's kind of what led me to this path. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say, but that's been 20-ish minutes. So thanks for your time. I put in the resources a link to our ongoing campaign, which is open to everyone in math, including undergrads. It's our academic boycott campaign. We really encourage anyone who feels as strongly as we do about this to sign on. And you can always reach out to me. Um, it's not hard to find my contact if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you. If everyone would welcome me or join me in thanking our speaker, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In 10-ish minutes.